All right, this is the, the Dvar Malchut, the royal words of the Rebbe, a speech that he gave in 1992, very shortly before he had a stroke, which rendered him paralyzed. He was mute, he couldn't speak. Oh, here we go. Here the In Parshas Kitisa, we found a new thing. This week's Torah portion. From the beginning to the end, it contains all the opposites. Listen to this. This Torah portion, it talks about things from one end to the other, the best of the best to the worst of the worst, and then something even better. First of all, talks about getting the first tablets, how the Jews got the first tablets on Mount Sinai. Then after that, it talks about how the Jewish people sinned with the golden calf and how Moses broke the first tablets. Then after that, it talks about how the Jewish people repented and Moses prayed for them, and Moses saw the glory of God, and God gave him the 13 attributes of mercy. Then after that, God gave Moses the second tablets, until finally in the end, at the second tablets, says the face, there was beams of light coming from Moses's face. Beams of light, Quran or Panei Moshe. There were beams of light which came from Moses's face. Moses' face shined light, which the famous thing, Michelangelo misinterpreted the word Karen, because the word Karen means a horn, that Moses had horns on his head. Even though that these are mi'uros, are occurrences, she'iru b'hemshech echad, there was really one continuum, exactly in the chronological order that it appears in our Torah portion, so it was. First, the Jewish people got the first tablets. Then they worshiped the golden calf. Then God said, I'm going to destroy you. And Moses prayed for them. Then Moses got the 13 attributes of mercy. Then Moses got the second tablets. Right? So these things it was really one continuum, but nos of the kach, in addition to the fact that we have to understand why the Torah even tells us these stories in such great detail, especially because the second part, the thing of the golden calf, is really very, how do you say, shameful. Huh? What do they call it? Deleterious remarks. It's very shameful. But the Jewish people received the Torah and they heard directly from God, don't worship idols. And 40 days later, they all did it. At least they all participated somehow or other. And especially it says, whatever there was, there was. Here we see, okay, the Jewish people worship the golden calf, but they got forgiven. So why dwell on this subject? Every year we have to read about it. It's written in the Torah. It says even more. Afilu b'ganut behema tamea lo diber Torah. The Torah doesn't even speak about unclean animals. It doesn't say in the Torah, the animals which are impure. It says the words animals which are not clean. Einenu tahora. It doesn't say shetmeya. The Torah tries to avoid saying bad things as much as possible. If so, okay, so why does the Torah dwell so much on this thing of the golden calf? It's really explained in great detail, in great, how do you say, shocking detail in this week's Torah portion. The whole story, everything that happened from the beginning to the end. Not only that, all of this whole continuum of getting the first tablets and then worship the golden calf and then getting forgiven, these are totally, I'd say, different topics. Mina katzeh could say from one end to the other. The greatest distance between them. The worst of the worst and the best of the best. First of all, the first tablets, that's the best of the best. There's nothing better than the first tablets. They are the highest things, shenitna milamayda, they were given from above. Haluchot Maseh Elokim Ema, the tablets were the work of God. V'michtav Michtav Elokim, and the writing was God wrote the letters. That's the best you could possibly have. There's nothing better than that. God Himself spoke to a whole nation, gave them tablets. That's the highest of high. There's never been such a thing in the history of the world. Nobody even claimed there was. Even those that claimed to replace Judaism, they didn't make up such a story. And here with the Jewish people, it really happened. That's the best of the best. Next step in this week's Torah portion, Shvirat Haluchot, the breaking of the tablets, because the Jewish people they worship the golden calf. This is the worst. This is the lowest of the lows. Right after that, there was the 13 attributes of mercy, and Moses saw the glory of God. This is the highest of the high. And after that, God gave the second tablets, which these were a lower type of tablets. Pasalacha, and says they were carved out by Moses. Moses did the whole thing. And Shabbat that came because of the sin and the breaking of the first tablets. And they were given at a different time. The first tablets were given at the end of the first 40 days. And the second tablets were given 80 days later. Besof Arba'im Yom Achronim. That was the last 40 days. Moses went up 3 times on Mount Sinai for 40 days. So at the end of the first 40 days, Moses got the first tablets and he broke them. And then Moses went up another 40 days and got forgiveness. And then another 40 days to get the second tablets. When did he come down the second time? When he brought the second tablets? On Yom Kippur. Alpha Pekin, nevertheless, all of them come in one continuum. One continuum. Shemizem, moving from this, is understood. Shenogea Leda, in order regarding that all of them are one part of one continuum. But even more, the Pashatenu in our Torah portion, it's also speaking about the quality of the first tablets. It talks about how great they are. Luchot Even, it says the first tablets, they were tablets of stone, and they were written by the hand of God. Luchot, they were tablets which were written on 2 sides. Mizeu Mizem Ketuvim. It says that there was a miracle that from whichever side you read, the letters went right through. So you figure if the letters went right through, that on one side it would be shaped properly, but the other side, when you read it, like holding up a mirror. So on the other side, when you read it, the letters would be all backwards. It would be backwards, but it wasn't. It says that when you read, I don't know how that was. When you read the letters, it says they could be read from both sides. The tablets were the tablets of God. Or Michtav, and the writing was the writing. God wrote them on the tablets. It keeps explaining to us how great the first tablets were, until the second tablets that they received, 80 days later. It always is stressed how great the first ones were. Like God says to Moses, Pasalacha, carve out to you tablets something like the first ones. Karishonim, like the first ones. B'chafa dimion, something like. Because the second tablets were like a copy of the first tablets. The first tablets, they were the main ones. Because the second tablets did not reach to the excellence and the holiness of the first tablets. And at first glance, says the Rebbe, Pirtei Amalos of Rishonim, all the details of the first tablets should have been written at the end of Parshas Mishpatim. Why? Because Parshas Mishpatim is talking about Sham, is the place where is talking about the first tablets. God says, go up to me on the mountain, and I will give you the first tablets of stone, etc. But Khan, here in our Torah portion, it would have been enough just to write in a short way. Like it says, that God gave the first tablets, and they were very nice, and then the Jewish people worshiped the golden calf. But this week's Torah portion, when should have been the explanation of how wonderful the first tablets were? When God gave the first tablets. When did God give the first tablets? He gave the first tablets in Parshat Yitro, but at the end of Mishpatim, which comes right after Yitro. And the Mishpatim, there's one whole section which really happened before the Torah was given. So that's where it should be written about the greatness of the first tablets, way back then. Why did God push it off 3 chapters and put it in the middle of Parshas Kitetse after the tablets were broken? Like it says, V'yitenu Moshe kalato when he's Har Sinai shtei luchot edut luchot evan, and afterwards Vayera the people saw that Moses delayed. It should have said in this week's Torah portion. It should say in this week's Torah portion a little bit about the first tablets, and then when the people saw that Moses was delaying bringing the first tablets down, then they worshiped the golden calf. But say a little bit about how great the first tablets were. What do you have to how do you say to pour salt on an open wound? So the Torah, why does the Torah here explain to us how great the first tablets were? And it doesn't explain it when the Torah was given how great the first tablets were. Only here when right before they're broken does it. How is it fitting that here you start talking about where after the Jews sinned and worshipped the golden calf, and Moses broke the tablets? Now you're telling about how great the first tablets were. This is something what's called lag l'rosh. It's like scoffing at a poor person, God forbid. Right? You see a poor person on the streets, say, I know you used to be rich, you used to have a lot of money, right? Big Cadillac you used to have, huh? Big Cadillac, look at you. That's not nice, that's cruel. That's what the Torah is doing here. The Torah is broken. Look at you now, the Torah is broken. Those tablets were really great. God spoke to you face to face, didn't he? Look at you now. You didn't have. How can the Torah do such a thing? Moving from this is understood. Shekan, that here is explanation of how great the first tablets were, not as a secondary thing or a preparation for the explaining the sin of the golden calf and the breaking of the tablets, but somehow or other this must be an explanation of the same topic of the first tablets. Shavirat haluchot v'luchot achronot. It must be explaining somehow or other a good thing. That the first tablets were really good, and they were wonderful, and they were broken. Great thing. What's so great? Well, let's see. I feel the Rashi, even according to Rashi, Torah, he said that everything happened in an orderly fashion. Everything mentioned in the Torah, at least in this case, was written in the order, it occurred in the order that it's written. So the Egel, the golden calf, came before. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. According to Rashi, that he says that there is no order to the Torah. I don't know why. Rashi says there is no order in the Torah. The way things are written are not necessarily the way they occurred. If so, how is the Torah written over here? How is the Torah written? This week's Torah portion talks about the breaking of the tablets. Last week and the week before, we're talking about the building of the tabernacle, or the commandments to build the tabernacle. According to Rashi, it didn't happen in that order. Didn't happen. First of all, the Jews worshipped the golden calf. And afterwards, God said, you know what? I forgive you. You can build a tabernacle. It said that the Egel, this was before the commandment to build the Mishkan, many days. On the 17th day of Tammuz, the tablets were broken. The 7th day of Tammuz, that's 40 days after they heard the 10 commandments at Sinai. They heard the 10 commandments at Sinai, and that was on Vav Sivan. 40 days later, the month after Sivan is Tammuz. And the 40 days later on Tammuz, Moses was supposed to come down with the tablets, but the Jewish people worshipped the golden calf, and he broke the tablets. Then 80 days after that, there was Yom Kippur. God forgave the Jewish people. And the day after that, Moses would receive the commandments about building the tabernacle. But even according to that, Ein Zeh Biur, this is not a sufficient explanation regarding to the details which are spoken here about the first tablets. And nevertheless, all these details about how wonderful the first tablets were, that should have been mentioned in Parshas Mishpatim, which was before this whole entire business. Mishpatim, which is before the commandments, before the commandments in this week's of the building of the tabernacle, like we said before. In other words, no matter how you explain it, even if you say according to Rashi that things did not happen in the order that they're here, however it is, here is not the place to talk about how great the first tablets were. And the main thing is like this, according to what's known, even though if you say that there is no order in the Torah, the Torah was not written in chronological order, Yeshnu Tam B'Seder Zeh, there's a reason for diverting from the chronological order. Everything in the Torah, every order in the Torah, it was not done just accidentally. Everything is exact. So we have to understand, why is it spoken over here in Parshas Ki Tisa when we talk about the sin of the golden calf, which we didn't know there could be such a thing before this? Why here does it talk about how great the first tablets were? And in addition to this, it's understood near this week's Torah portion that it has no connection here at all. There's the commandment of the 3 holidays. At the end of this week's Torah portion, all of a sudden is stuck the commandment for making 3 holidays. What's the connection? Okay, so we're left with several questions over here. Number one, we see that this week's Torah portion contains topics where the worst of the worst and the best of the best. We see in this week's Torah portion that the best of the best, which is the first tablets, here explained about how great they are. There's no reason why it has to explain over here how great the first tablets were. It should have been explained weeks ago when we learned about the giving of the tablets at Sinai. Why does it explain here how great the tablets were when we're talking about how they're being broken? Okay. Even more. There's even more of it. Now you have to remember that God wrote the Torah. Moses did not write the Torah. Moses just transcribed the Torah. God told Moses what to write, and he wrote, but Moses did not author the Torah. The Torah is not written. The Torah is written by God. These are the letters of God, the words of God, the sentences of God. Every single letter, every word is written by God himself. Just that Moses was the scribe, he was the prophet, and he gave it over to the Jewish people. But the first 2 of the 10 commandments, they heard directly from God. They just couldn't take it anymore. God would have said the whole entire thing to them. So if there's an order to the Torah, it must be something really, really very special. And I know I've said this so many times before, but the human body is like the Torah. And just like in the human body, it's very, very complicated, the human body. And if there's one little corpuscle or one little vein or one little nerve that's not right, then it could throw a monkey wrench into the whole thing. When a person that has an ingrown toenail or something like that, he can't think. He can't think properly, he can't function. One little tiny thing, what's the big deal? The same thing with the Torah. One little letter is off, so there's something drastic. Right? Every letter is very exact in order for it to be alive. So why there was, if so, the Rebbe says so, but the Torah is here for us to understand it. We have to understand. The Torah was given to us to understand. So therefore, it is necessary that we should ask questions. And sometimes the answers that we get give us a totally new insight to life itself. Because the Torah is given by God who's creating us. Okay. The question is even stronger, says the Rebbe. The question is even stronger because the fact that Parsha Kitisa, this week's Torah portion, it's known that the name of the Torah portion, Kitisa, means when you lift up. It means when you count the Jews. You're supposed to count them. Everybody gives what's called a half a shekel. But the word for counting here is an unusual word. Kitisa is when you lift up. It's known that the name of the Torah portion, this indicates the content of the Torah portion. According to this, so we have to have an explanation about our Torah portion. The name of the Torah portion, Kitisa, this is talking about the commandment in the beginning to count the Jews and take a half of a shekel. But there's no connection whatsoever, apparently, to the rest, what comes afterwards. That the whole entire Torah portion is talking about totally different things. All of a sudden, it starts off with this idea of counting the Jews, half a shekel. At first glance, there's no connection one to the other. Here's one commandment about counting the Jews. Every Jew gives a half of a shekel. And then it launches into this whole thing about how Moses went up to get the tablets, and the tablets were wonderful, and they were great. And the Jewish people worshipped the golden calf because they thought he came down late. They thought that Moses wasn't going to come down at all. And then he broke the tablet. But it's talking about totally different things. In the beginning, it's giving just a simple commandment that God gave, which has seemingly no connection to what comes afterwards. And even more, this whole thing about the worship of the golden calf, which that's the most, that takes up the greatest portion of this week's Torah reading. This is a descent. This is a disgrace, that there's no greater disgrace than this. It says, by means, when the Torah was given, death ceased from the world. If the Jewish people would not have sinned with the golden calf, there would be no more death. And by means of them sinning with the golden calf, chazra zehu matan, there came back this defilement from the tree of knowledge. Until this is the Rosh V'Shorish, it comes out that the source of all sins nowadays is the golden calf. Because sin and death are synonymous. Death is a result of sin. Death is a result of sin. And what is sin? Sin means cutting yourself off from the source of life. God says this, but I don't want to do it. Or God says, you must do this. And I say, I'm not going to do it. Right? God says X, I'm going to do Y. Because of that, you're cutting yourself off from the source of life, that's death. When the Torah was given, every Jew knew and felt what a Jew is. A Jew is a person that does what God wants. As soon as they sinned and they went against, all of a sudden a Jew became a person that can do whatever he wants. That says, they brought death back into the world. When God said, whenever you do sins and I punish you for the sins, I'll bring back a little bit of the first sin, this sin, which is the golden calf. And Paranos Bo Yisrael, that the, retribution from God only comes on the Jewish people, only because they have a little bit of the sin of the golden calf. And why? Why? Because God said to Moses, Moses said to God, forgive the Jewish people, they won't do it again. And God said, okay. And every time they sin again, God says, remember the sin of the golden calf? I told you you were going to do it again. I knew it. I should have never forgiven you back then. But Moses is interceding. Every generation has to have a Moses that cares about all the Jewish people. Therefore, but the diuk la'ipach, exactly the opposite of the name of this week's Torah portion. What's the name of this week's Torah portion? Kitisa, when you elevate the heads of the Jewish people, Nesiyat Rosh, elevating the head of the Jewish people. Also, the same thing at the end of this week's Torah portion. It says that when Moses came down with the second tablets, that his face shined with beams of light, karne hod, beams of glory. This also has to be explained. Why is this Moses? Why did he get his face started shining when he came down with the second tablets? When he came down with the first tablets, right before he saw the Jews sinning with the golden calf, why wasn't his face shining then? Halo kavar nene niziv shechina. Moses was he was, how do you say, nourished by the ray of God's Shekhinah, God's presence, for the first days that he was up on Mount Sinai. Just like just like the last 40 days he was up. Even more, the revelation of the first tablets was greater. Ariyoya Naliyota was greater than the second tablets. The second tablets, it says that the first tablets were pure godliness. The tablets themselves were godly. In addition to this, that the first tablets, this came after the highest revelation. All the Jewish people were together in Mount Sinai. When God gave the first tablets, all the Jewish people got out of Egypt. They said, well, they all were there. They all saw it. They all felt that there was lightnings and thunders, and the people shook and everything like that. With the second tablets, Moses, he came down with the second tablets alone. There was no there's no thunders, no lightning. If so, how can it possibly be that when Moses came down with the second tablets, that's when his face was shining? Why weren't they shining both times? Huh? Should have shined the first time when Moses saw the Jewish people sitting with the golden calf. Then the beams of light went away. That's not what it was. When Moses came down with the first tablets, says that his face was not shining. Not at all. When he came down with the second tablets, his face was shining. Why is that? Abir Bazeh, the explanation is like this. In order to understand this, first of all, we have to have a little sort of take a step back. This whole entire Torah portion, from the 52 Torah portions of the Torah, each one has a special, unique message that divides it from all the other Torah portions. Kumuvan, which is understood from the fact that every single Torah portion is only read once a year. Alter says similarly also to this week's Torah portion, Kitisa. What's the special, unique message? Yachad, together with the fact that Kitisa is a Torah portion on its own, but also this is a wondrous Torah portion that has in it a big, big novelty. Unlike all the others, everyone is something unique, but this has something, a real knockout novelty. Shahaya Kolelas B'tochu, it has all of the whole entire order of creation from the beginning until the end. We'll see how. Beginning for how it's written in the Torah, the whole entire order of the creation of all of the worlds from the beginning to the end. From the whole Torah until the beginning, until the completion. So therefore, this Torah has everything. Let's see how so. And B'chol in Torah, everything there is in the Torah, you can find everything in the Torah contains everything else. K'mayim result, like the rabbis say, hafach bo l'kulabo. Everything is in it. I think nowadays they have this thing called DNA. DNA, which if you get a little tiny bit of the tissue of a person, even a little bit of that person's saliva or sweat or anything, you can tell who that person is. Huh? Nowadays they're solving all these crimes, these weird crimes. Right? They found out who robbed this bank whatever years ago because they found a little bit of this person's a hair or whatever it is, a finger, not even a fingerprint. They find a little bit of something, maybe a cut, and they found a little bit of his dried blood over there. They can trace it back. They know exactly who the person was and what his age is and his. So what every little bit of a person contains the whole rest of the person. Same thing as the Torah. Every detail of the Torah contains the whole entire Torah. The Yishlom, we can say that this refers on not just in general the Torah, but also every detail of the Torah. How much more so one whole Torah portion. But in the usually the fact that everything is found encapsulated in every detail of the Torah, this is found only in little hints or gematrias or something like that. And we have to really work on it. But in this week's Torah portion, everything is revealed. The beginning, middle, and end. Let's see how. How is this going to be? How is this going to be? This and much more we are going to see tomorrow. Let's just read the first paragraph. God created the world in such a way that everything in the world has a beginning, a middle, and an end. First of all comes the beginning, the head. That includes inside of it everything, like the brain includes everything. After that comes the thing itself. That's the content. And by means of this, it eventually comes to the sum total, the result. The result, the goal is revealed. So everything has a beginning, and then it has like let's say a journey. A journey has a beginning, then it has the journey itself, and then it has the goal, where you're coming to. Everything, that's the way God set up the world. So also is this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion has these three things. First of all, there's the Torah before the world. The Torah is the blueprint for the world. Then there's the creation of the world. That's the journey. And then there's the completion of the world. That's Moshiach, the future redemption. That's A, B, Aleph, Beit, Gimel. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet. That's in the Torah. Those are the letters of the Torah. Aleph is the beginning. Beit is the middle. And Gimel is the end, as we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow.